So we've been focusing on common factoring the last couple of days. Today we're going to take a look at trinomial factoring. So our goal is to learn how to undo the double distributive law and turn a trinomial, where x squared has no coefficient, or actually has a coefficient of 1, back into two binomials. For the rest of the semester, we're really going to be focusing on quadratic relations. So we're going to be looking at equations that have x squared as the lead term in it. So we've worked with ax squared plus bx plus c before. Today we're going to start with simple trinomials. So they're going to be of this form, x squared plus bx plus c. So in other words, the value of a out in front is going to be 1. So our goal is to take a simple trinomial like x squared plus 10x plus 24, and we're going to change it into two binomials that multiply together to give that, which in this case would be x plus 4 and x plus 6. So we're going to start where all mathematicians do. We're going to look for a pattern to start with. So we're kind of going to work by expanding and simplifying first, and then we'll figure out how to work backwards to factor these. So if I have x plus 4 times x plus 3, you guys can pause right now and then come back and have a look at the answer. Of course, when I said that you were to pause it, I was hoping that you would do the question, so hopefully you did, and hopefully you came up with x squared plus 7x plus 12. Now I'm going to get you to go ahead and try the second one here, and then check and see if you got the right answer for that one. Now, if your answers are different than what I have here, you should really pause it and look back and try and figure out where you went wrong before you continue here. So, we're focusing first off on situations where the binomials have the same sign. So either both binomials that we're multiplying together are plus or positive in the middle, or they're both subtracting or negative in the middle. So let's have a look at what information we can take from what we have up above. So when we are multiplying binomials together that have the same signs, the first thing that we can say is that the sign of the last term is always going to be positive. So it doesn't matter whether it's negatives that we're multiplying together or positives, the last term is always going to be positive in our final answer there. The middle term, so here the middle term is a positive, and here it's a negative. So if you connect that to where we started up above, this one's positive in the middle when we had two positives up here. This one's negative in the middle when we have the two negatives up here. So the sign of the middle term is always the same sign of those that are in the brackets. And so that's talking about the signs. Now we're going to talk about the numbers. The last number here is the product of the constant terms in the bracket. So product means multiply. So the number on the end here is always the multiplication of these two here. So 4 times 3, 4 times 3, that gives us the number on the end. The middle number, so now we're looking at the 7 in the middle, it's the sum of these two numbers here. So 4 plus 3, 4 plus 3, that's where the 7 is coming from there. Okay, so we're going to use that information later on when we're working backwards to factor. Let's take a look at what happens when the binomials have different signs. So same thing, you can pause the video here and go ahead and expand both these questions, and then you can check it and compare it to my answers. So this time you can see in the first example here, the 4 is positive and the 3 is negative, here and here. And in the second one, the 3 is positive, the 4 is negative. So that's the difference in the questions. And the answers look quite similar. The only real difference in these two answers is the sign that we get with the middle term. So let's just make a summary of what we see from up above. So the sign of the last term, when the two numbers in the brackets are different signs, it's always going to be negative. So we get negative 12 up above, and that's because we're multiplying a positive times a negative and a positive times a negative. That's why we're getting the negative at the end with the 12. And of course, the sign of the middler term, let's just call it the middle term today. So the sign of the middle term, well, in this one, this is where they're different. In this one, we get a positive sign in the middle. In this one, we get a negative sign in the middle. Can we figure out why that happens? And if we look up above, in these brackets, the bigger number is the positive one when we compare those two. So that's why we end up with a positive here. In this situation, when we compare these two numbers, the bigger number is with the negative. That's why we end up with the negative there. So the sign of the middle term is same as the larger number in the brackets. And the last number, the last number, so this number 12, is like it was before, it's the product of the two constant terms in the bracket. So it's the product of constant terms in the brackets. So in both cases, we're multiplying the 3 and the 4 together to get the 12, 3 and the 4 together to get the 12 here. And the middle number, so that 1 is the difference between the constant terms in the bracket. So the difference between 4 and 3 is 1. So the middle number is the difference between the constant terms in the bracket. Okay. Now the next page has a flow chart. I'm not going to go through the whole flow chart, but the beginning of the flow chart I find very helpful, because if we take a look at, so it starts off by saying, what is the sign of the constant term in the trinomial? So we really want to check and see, is that a positive or a negative at the end? Because if it's a positive, then we know that the signs and the factors are going to be the same. If C is a negative value, then we know the signs and the factors are different. So we're going to use that to help us out on the next page to actually try and factor some trinomials. So it says use the factoring flow chart to help you factor the following. My guess is that you probably only need it for that first step, but you can certainly refer to it if you do find it helpful. Okay? So in all these situations, we're going to try and figure out the signs that go in the two brackets first, and then we'll sort out the numbers. So remember, we're working backwards now. So in this question here, I want to come up with what I had in the two brackets, that when I expanded it, I ended up getting n squared minus n minus 56. So when the last term is negative, if I look back at my flow chart, when it's negative, I know the signs and the factors are different. So that means that 1 is going to be a minus, 1 is going to be a plus. Doesn't matter which bracket I write it in. At the start, because I'm getting n squared up above, I know that I have to get n and n there to get n squared. All right, so I've sorted out the signs. Now here's what I have to do. I have to find two numbers that multiply to 56 and subtract to, and the number in front of this n is a 1. So multiply to 56 and then subtract because of this subtraction sign here to give -1. So, numbers that multiply to 56 and subtract to give 1. Well, numbers that go into 56, 1 times 56 is 56. 2 times 28 is 56. That's not going to work. 3 doesn't divide into it. 4 goes into 56 14 times. That's not going to work. 6 doesn't win. 7 goes in 8 times. And I think that's it. So I'm looking for two numbers that multiply to give 56 and subtract to give -1. And the 8 and the 7 are going to work for me. So if I need it to add to -1, then that means the 8 has to be negative and the 7 has to be positive. And we can always check here because -8 times 7 equals the -56, and that's what we have up here. And if we do -8 plus 7, we get -1, and that's what we have up here. So that's the way it should always work out. Those two numbers should multiply to give the last number and add to give the middle number. Okay? Now I'm showing lots of steps here and writing lots of things down. You don't always have to write all these things down, but for the first few we'll do that just to help out. All right, in the second one here, this time they multiply to give a positive constant on the end. So if I come back to my flow chart, if it's positive, then the factors are the same. And so that means that they're either both positive or both negative. But if there's a negative in the middle here, then it means that both of these are going to be negative. So this is going to be x minus and x minus. So I'm trying to find two numbers that multiply. Oh, I got a phone call. Just hold on. Hello? Hi, honey. Okay, I'm going to be probably about 5 more minutes here, just finishing up. I will. Okay. All right, bye. That was Mrs. Driscoll. She says hi. All right, I'm just going to pause things for a sec here. I'll be right back. All right, so we need two numbers that multiply to 24 and add to 4. Well, we've got a problem there because there are not two numbers that multiply to 24 and add to 4. So sometimes, we found this yesterday with some of the common factoring ones, sometimes you're going to get questions that are just not possible to factor. So you can just put not possible there. All right, then we get to this one here. Okay. Our C value on the end here is positive. So we know that either both of these are positive or both of these are negative. Because this middle term is positive, that means that both of these have to be positive. So we're looking for two numbers that multiply to give 7 and add to give 8. Well, the only numbers that multiply to give 7 are 1 and 7, and they add to give 8, so that's our answer there. Over here, do the signs first. We can put the ends in. Positive here, that means either both signs are positive here and here or negative. But because this middle sign is negative, we know that these two are going to be negative here. So we are looking for two numbers that multiply to give 10 and add to give 11. All right? And in this case, it's going to be 1 and 10. The only other numbers that multiply to give 10 are 2 and 5. They don't add to give us 11, so it's going to be n minus 1 and n minus 10. All right, and we get down to this guy here. Do the signs first. And once you get into a groove on these, it's not too bad. You know you're going to have B's at the start. They both have to be the same sign. They both have to be positive. And now I need two numbers that multiply to give 64 and add to give 16. All right, so when you run through the numbers that multiply to give 64, so 1 and 64, not 164. Let me just slide things over a little bit here. Good times. We having fun yet? Oh man, I'm making a mess of the place. All right, let's try that. So I've got 1 and 64. I've got 2 and 32. 4 goes into 64 16 times. 8 goes into 64 8 times. So if I need two numbers that multiply to give 64 and add to give 16, it's got to be the 8s. So that's going to be an 8 and an 8. And if you really wanted to be fancy, you could write it as b plus 8 squared. Nice. Okay, last one here. I'm going to just get rid of these guys so I have some room. So first things first, I've got a negative on the end here, so I've got 1 that's going to be a plus, 1 that's going to be a minus. So I need two numbers that multiply to give 12 and subtract to give 4. So if I look at a list of numbers that multiply to give 12, 1 and 12, 2 and 6, 3 and 4, the two numbers there that have a difference of 4, or subtract to give 4, are 2 and 6. And we need the bigger number to be positive here. So 6 and 2. So remember, when you get down to here, these two numbers that you end up with should multiply together to give this number, and they should add together to give that number every time. So whenever we're doing simple trinomials, it should work out like that. Okay, the last one here, I know this one is dragged on a little long, but it is all new stuff here, so it's important that we do a number of examples so you get it under control. So in this one here, put down my two brackets. This means that there are different signs in the brackets. So one is a plus, one is a minus. I need two numbers that multiply to give 24 and subtract to give 2. So two numbers that multiply to give 24 and subtract to give 2 are 6 and 4. We need 6 to be the positive, because it's got to be the bigger one, so that's going to be 6 and 4. All right, so you guys can practice this in class tomorrow, and I will catch up with you guys then. Thanks. Bye. Bye.